Then I hated all my labor in which I had toiled under the sun, because I must leave it to the man who will come after me. And who knows whether he will be wise or a fool? Yet he will rule over all my labor in which I have toiled, and in which I have shown myself wise under the sun. This also is vanity. Therefore I turned my heart and despaired of all the labor in which I had toiled under the sun. For there is a man whose labor is with wisdom, knowledge, and skill. Yet he must leave his heritage to a man who has not labored for it. This also is vanity and great evil. For what has man for all his labor, and for the striving of his heart with which he has toiled under the sun? For all his days are sorrowful, and his work burdensome. Even in the night his heart takes no rest. This also is vanity. Nothing is better for a man than that he should eat and drink, and that his soul should enjoy good in his labor. This also I saw was from the hand of God. For who can eat, or who can have enjoyment more than I? For God gives wisdom and knowledge and joy to a man who is good in his sight. But to the sinner he gives the work of gathering and collecting, that he may give to him who is good before God. This also is vanity and grasping for the wind. Amen. Yeah. So I would just test out whether I want my timer here or my timer there. It's normally there. Maybe it could be here, maybe there. Small things make a big difference. It's your first lesson for this evening. Small things make a big difference. So, what about the future? What about the future? It doesn't seem a particularly dangerous, threatening question. And yet, how many times, in how many forms, does that question intrude upon your peace and rob you of your present joy? There you are, surrounded by the people you love, doing something that you love. And then the thought comes, it can't last. It can't stay like this forever. Then the thought comes about that other thing that soon you will have to turn your hand to. And the serene happiness that you ought to be enjoying, it's disturbed. It's poisoned by the intrusion of the future. Well, our preacher here is plagued by the future. And as usual, he opens up for us the torments. But he does so in order to make clear a way of escape and a way of joy, a way to deal with thoughts about the future. So, what about the future? What about it? The concern here is dressed in certain clothes. Even if a man were to take all that he'd learned in verse 21, his wisdom, his knowledge, his skill, even verse 24, his natural goods, the fruit from his labor, the goods that God has put into the creation. If he were to take his joy, the pleasures and mirth, verse 26, that we talked about in the first part of this chapter, endure the pains of life, verse 22, labor, toil, and the strivings of his heart, and give his very best, even if he were to incorporate all of this into his philosophy of living, put his hand to the plow, give his best, give his all, what would be the point? Because no matter how excellent, how rich, and how beautiful a legacy he leaves behind, and remember, this is a man who excelled, he says in chapter 1, verse 16, in greatness and wisdom. A man, he says in verses 4 to 5, who had made the most delightful of buildings, the most delightful of gardens and orchards. A man, he says in verse 25, who could eat and enjoy himself more than any other. Even so, all of this, he says, verse 21, must be left to somebody who has never worked for it. All of this must be left to somebody who has never worked for it and thus at the same time has no appreciation, does not esteem the value of everything that he has built, his whole life's work. Worse than this, he says in verse 18 to 19, it might just fall into the hands of a fool, not even somebody who is moderately wise as he was, but the hands of a fool. Verse 18, he says, then I hated all my labor in which I toiled under the sun, because I must leave it to the man who will come after me, and who knows whether he will be wise or a fool. All that this righteous man of God has done to shun throughout his life, everything that he has worked against, the folly of the one who turns away from enlightened reason, his life's work just might end up in the grubby hands of such a deranged and damaged soul. This is a great burden to him. This is a great bother to his soul. And we can relate. We can relate. What of our life? And what of our legacy? What of everything that you have ever done, ever accomplished? The family you have raised? And you might be like, well, when I'm gone, so I'm not going to care. You've probably heard that attitude out in the world. Well, I'll be in the ground, the worms will be eating me, so what do I care what becomes of it all? But if you have invested, worked, and valued anything, invested and worked and valued anything, it is impossible to be so flippant and resigned to such a fate. What of the positive culture that you worked so hard to create at work? What becomes of it when you leave? It all just goes back to the ruin it was before. What of the business that you have built with your own hands? What of your name and reputation and brand? What of the lovely garden that you have spent your retirement perfecting? Is it really worth it knowing that I might take over and ruin it, somebody like me? Or somebody else might move in and tarmac over it and destroy the roses that you have lovingly nurtured? What about church planting? The burden that the few of us have taken on, what about it? If it all comes to nothing, if it doesn't succeed, is it really worth it? You imagine if Paul could have known what would become of the churches that he'd planted, of the heresies, the schisms, and the death. Would he still say that it was worth it while he was laboring, while he was building? And what of your kids? What of your children? The sacrifices and all of the love that you have poured into them, this thought that one day you must leave them to the world and you're not there to protect them anymore. You can't marry them yourself. And as creepy as that sounds, it's meant to be a good thing. I'm raising these daughters, so sweet, so godly. We're doing everything we can to see that Christ is formed in them. And then there's this anxious thought that someday I have to hand them over to the hands of some idiot. It's an unbearable thought that I can't be him, that I can't be the one nurturing, protecting, loving, always for these little ones. You get the point. There is so much that we have to be thankful for. But you think about the future for more than a moment, and it seems that the more you love, the more you appreciate a thing, a person, the more painful it is that you've got to leave it all behind. And really this fear of what happens when we go, when we die, is but a subset and a form of a more general concern for the future. It doesn't just have to be death, but what about next week? What about next month? What about next year? What about the next 10 years? Anna has a gift. She can peer cautiously and cheerfully ahead. We talked about it the other night in bed. When Mary leaves, the children go to university. But I can't contemplate the day that my kids are sent out. I can't contemplate the day that I'm not there to see that they're okay. And yet I have to. I can't bear the weight of wishing for a world and for circumstances for them that I don't have the powers to create and to bring into reality. What about the future? And we can't live like this, secondly. It kills me to think about the future, but it's killing him too. This preoccupation with the future, it makes us ill. He says in verse 23, "For all his days are sorrowful, and his work burdensome. Even in this night, his heart, it takes no rest." And this also is vanity. This is not a normal way to live. This is a disorder. It's a thing that is out of place. And we know this because he's going to go on to say in chapter 5 and verse 12 that the sleep of a laboring man is sweet. And so he's saying that this is a corrupted, this is a damaged way to live. We can't live like this anymore. We have to stop allowing the future to destroy the present. How many of you worry at night? I mean, some thankfully don't, but I do. And I know that a lot of other people do too. And on the one hand, I totally get it. It's just there at night that you are alone with your thoughts. It's just there that you're able to process your worst fears. But on the other hand, it's totally mental. I lie there sometimes in bed, like, what am I doing? Awake and worried. There are some people who sleep tonight not knowing whether a bomb is going to drop on their house and that they'll wake to see the next morning. And I'm in a cozy bed with my nice wife, and we've got this cuddling pillow that's meant to support the pregnancy tummy at the moment, and we call her Berenice, and I get to cuddle Berenice as well as my wife, and I've got my children and my baby in the bed, and we have this lovely house, and we live on a quiet and still street. We're so blessed, and yet there I am, wasting it, awake like an idiot in the night, worried about the future, about things that might never happen. He almost here moves to a solution, but he awkwardly falls short. He's like, here's what we should do, verse 24. We should understand this, that nothing is better for a man than that he should eat and drink, and that his soul should enjoy good in his labor. This also I saw was from the hand of God. So here's what we need to do. We need to receive and be grateful for everything that we have and everything that we are able to do as something that comes from God. Now that is the actual solution. I'm going to get back to it. But he introduces it here, and then he goes on in verse 26, still sounding kind of positive. For God gives wisdom, God gives knowledge, God gives joy to a man who is good in his sight. But to the sinner he gives the work of gathering and collecting, that he may give to the one who is good before God. And you think, great, he's got it figured out. We just receive all things as a gift from the Lord, and we understand that if we are faithful to God, if we live a life of righteousness, then it is the sinner who for all of his toil will have nothing to show. We, on the other hand, will have our hands full. We've got it, haven't we? This is it. But then he ends back with his same familiar slump. At the end there, at the end of verse 26, this also is vanity and grasping for the wind. And so it's weird. We thought he was onto something, and yet still, he ends with his head on the table. Well, I don't think that verse 26 is actually meant to be positive. I think what he is saying is that verse 26 is how in an ideal world everything would work out. This is how things should be, he says. This is how I wish things would be. And maybe in an ultimate sense they will be just like that. But for verse 24 and for verse 26, everything that I've just said about the future in verses 18 to 23 undercuts the happy thought. Everything that he has seen and fear and experience that might happen, the future, creeps in and steals the happy thought from the preacher. Now, clearly there is a sensible and reasonable foresight that we exercise. There is a reasonable way to plan for the future. We want to make sure that our clothes are ironed for the things that are coming up. You got your shirt ready for work. You want to make sure that you've saved a little bit for Christmas and for your holiday. You set a little aside for repairs and for unforeseen expenses. You want to plan, you want to structure your work week. You want to chip away at your long-term projects. All of that is reasonable planning. Why? Because it is within the reach of what is known and can be reasonably expected. So it is prudent behavior. God has given us the gift of foresight to be prudent, to be careful about the future. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about what can't be known. We're talking about feeling threatened and chewed up about what might never be, anticipating bad outcomes, expecting the worst, living potentially for some future good. So this is the other side of it. He's looking forward to the future with dread. My life's legacy might fall into the hands of some fool. But that also tells us that he is looking to the future for his ultimate satisfaction instead of seeking it in the present where he finds himself, where God has placed him. Seeking some better place and some distant happiness than the place where he is and the happiness that God has laid up for him in reality. And so we've got to beware of unhealthy thoughts about the future, near or far. They are poison to our peace, poison to our joy, poison to our soul. And yet, how many of you just grit and bear the day because you know your day off's coming, and because you've got something else to look forward to? You're looking to the future for happiness, rather than receiving the happiness that God has given to you in the present. How often do you allow unsubstantiated dread, non-events, to intrude into what actually is, into what is actually happening? We said at the beginning in our introduction, there we are in the moment, maybe enjoying a nice meal, out with friends, playing a nice game. But these thoughts about realities that might never exist, they come in and they strangle our joy. They strangle our happiness. We can't live like this. It's disordered to live this way. As I said in verse 23, this is something that needs to be corrected. We can't live like this. It's not living to live like this. It's not life. And nor do we have to, and nor does the Lord want us to live this way. So what about the future? We can't keep living with questions about the future. What then are we to do? Well, thirdly, we are to receive all as gift. We're to receive all as gift and live in a world of grace. Receive all as gift, live in a world of grace, a world of grace. See, we often live as though life is mostly work, mostly, if not all work. And there's little else to it except some brief, fleeting escape from the drudgery of our labors. Or else, if we dare to enjoy some fuller life for a little while aside from our work, we begin to justify it on the grounds that we might soon return to the salt mines of our lives. This mindset, I believe, has damaged us. It is the mindset of a slave. The mindset of a slave. Behind it is a theology that sees God predominantly as an employer for whom everything is about productivity and results and outcomes. Is that how you think about God? God is there taking you like a rock, and he is squeezing the blood out of you, and you better make your life as useful and as fruitful as possible. And you dare to enjoy your life even for a moment. Well, it's got to be so that you can get back to doing something useful with it. That is not God at all. God is not an employer. God is what? He is rich in grace. He's rich in grace. Do you know what grace means? Grace is to gift. God is rich in giving and gifting us good things. God is supremely relational. Life is not work. Life is gracious communion with God. That's what life is. All of it is gracious communion with God. And so the answer here to the unhealthy foreboding about the future is given in verse 24. Nothing is better for a man than that he should eat and drink, and that his soul should enjoy good in his labor. This also I saw from the hand of God. And you could broaden this not just to the goods that he enjoys as a result of his labor, but including the labor itself, including the food, including the drink, including all of the good pleasures that he has explored from the beginning of chapter 2, including the pursuit of knowledge and wisdom that he's explored in chapter 1. We are to trust that all we are receiving in work, when we go to work, in our learning, in our recreation, in the goods of life, in food, in wine, in music, in art, in literature, in architecture, in community and family, that all of these things are from the hand of God. They're from the hand of God. This is not life for the sake of work, and nor is it work for the sake of life, but rather all things as they are right now are real life. God is now and always in the now, lavishing himself upon you in your varied experiences, intending your good. And as you walk by faith, he is present in all of it. In your work, in your recreation, in your enjoyment of the arts, in your enjoyment of a nice food. What of the future then? This was the fly that spoiled the ointment. We thought we were getting somewhere, and then he was like, but the future, it steals this happy thought, this happy pathway to joy. What of the future? Well, I think deliberately that the way that the passage is laid out here is to help us to see the absurdity of it. Here he is stressed out about the future, and then he's like, but look, I can see that everything is from God. I live in this world that is gracious. I don't live as a slave. I live as a son and daughter of God. But then he's like, but the future, and then it's vanity and grasping for the wind. And we're supposed to read it, and we're supposed to say, so there's the problem. Stop letting the future get in the way of this life of grace that God has prepared for you. What of the future? Let it go. You're not in control. You don't know what's going to happen. There might be some great evil down the road, but you don't get to know a thing about it. In fact, in the good old days, it was considered a vice. We talked about this a little while back over lunch. A vice, curiositas. It was a sin of the intellect to peer and to obsess over what is not given and what has not been revealed. We need grace, we need self-control to overcome this sin of curiositas. The good news is this. We don't know what the future holds, but the mysteries belong to God. Not God the boss, but God the gracious and the generous. And as his son and daughter, we don't live then in a world of work and fear and dread. We live in a world of grace and of gift. And we are to adopt and practice this mindset. Life is not all about work. Life is all about grace, whether we are in work or we are out of work. If we are working, we tell ourselves, this is his gift to me, that I've been put in this place to serve in this particular way at this particular time. If you're with your family and you're playing with your children, you say, this is God's gift to me. He has given me these souls to love and to enjoy just as I am doing. If you're getting to grips with a new hobby, you're enjoying a lie-in, you're having your favorite kind of day, don't you tell yourself that this is so that you might recharge and then get back to it. It's not. It is his gift to be enjoyed for what it is. The old theology takes more from Pharaoh than it does from Christ. Christ has come that we would have the fullness of life and fullness of joy. And really at the heart of our problem is misunderstanding then the gospel. The more that you believe the gospel, that God is freely giving to us all things in his Son, the more central you make worship, where you come into a knowledge of the gospel that God has freely given to us all things in his Son, because this is his nature, the more we begin to believe that all of life is grace. And the more we receive life as grace, we tell ourselves, wow, God wants me to have this moment that I find myself in, this experience. This is his good will, his gracious will to me, that he wants to lift me up at this present moment in joy. As you have that attitude and as you experience God through all of life, the more you become persuaded that he really is gracious and good and that he is not the employer in the sky who is seeking to make sure that you're making up your hours. And the more you become persuaded that God is gracious and good and no slave master, the more happy you become that the future is in his hands. That he who dispenses all of this precious good, these present precious goods in our life, so you've got to see them as goods from his hand that he wants you to enjoy. The one who dispenses all of this precious good is the same God who dispenses the future, and we can rest in that. And so here is our mantra. We do need to be good before God. We do need to be good. We do need to walk according to his precepts and commandments by the Spirit through Christ. And so here is our mantra. We live righteously. We enjoy all as a gift. You don't tell yourself, this is so that I can work, this is so I can get back to work. You enjoy all things as a gift from God, and you be at rest in God. Live righteously, enjoy all as a gift, be at rest in God. Live righteously, enjoy all as gift, be at rest in God. Live righteously, enjoy all as gift, and be at rest in God. Amen.